How you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Good, thank you. Good. So, I picked up your book, Kill It with Fire, and
Hmm.
I am almost done with it. And I gotta say, this might be one of my favorite books. And so I randomly reached out, and here we are. So
I, s- I so love hearing that. I really do. Because it was like before it was published, it was a bit of a question mark whether anyone would want to read a book like this, whether anyone would find any value in a book like this. So I love hearing that. And I love hearing from people from all different like walks of like technology and the value they've gotten out of it. So thank you for reading and thank you for promoting it.
yeah, no worries. At least we can do. As an author, I know how it is. But before we get going on stuff, I guess for people who don't know who you are, do you want to give a quick intro?
Yeah, sure. My name is Marianne Bellotti. I think I'm probably best known as the author of the book Kill It with Fire, which is primarily about legacy modernization challenges. But really, I think my main motivation in writing that book was having learned that when you're wrestling with old systems and trying to restore their operational excellence, you learn a lot of things that are actually relevant when you're trying to build new systems. So I think that I spend a lot of time either building engineering teams or consulting with engineering teams about their challenges or looking at really, really, really interesting, really old and really important systems and trying to figure out how to untangle them.
That's a lot, and I would think that some people would say that's a lot of pain too. So,
Well,
uh,
it's like I think in general, people have different ideas of a good time, right?
sure.
There are definitely people that I've known in my life where they are like they go super hard for things that I find absolutely boring, tedious, just painful things.
What would
And
be an example?
Oh man, I mean like I know a lot of engineers that are like really into like the project management side of things and like
Mm.
having their perfect little Jira boards and organizing them and making sure all of their tickets are very well documented. And like I totally understand and accept the value of that. If I slack off on all of that
I
because
do too,
I
by the way.
find that very tedious, right? But I think that that's part of thinking about things, technology and its challenges in teams, right? Like, so it's always very easy for me knowing that I hate that and knowing that there are people that love that to then know, okay, so I'm coming into this situation. There's nobody around that fits that type of like, I love this type of work. So that's one of the things I'm going to hire for. I'm going to look for the person that loves that type of work because that's kind of a deficiency in my process and then we'll offset one another, right?
Yeah, that's super cool. So, I guess, how did you discover that you liked this type of work?
Well, so my background is like my formal education is almost entirely in social sciences. And in particular, I started really fascinated by anthropology and ethnography and just study of how people organize and develop culture and practices around that culture. And so that's the place that I take a lot of this work to when you're looking at an old system in a very real sense. You're looking at like an artifact of how people see the world and how they defined things. Because I think we often think about software as being like very mathematical and very logical and very objective, but it's based on abstractions and how you define your abstractions and like where you see the boundaries of them is all subjective and very cultural. So, for example, I was doing an exercise with a group of engineers a couple weeks ago where we were talking about the architecture of an online store and the notion of a shopping cart and whether that's something that actually needs to be represented in software. Do you need to have like an object or a data structure that is your shopping cart? Or do you just need to have an icon of a shopping cart? And actually, the abstractions behind the scene are completely different. And so it's always interesting to see how different engineers bring a different perspective to the table because none of it is objective, right? So when you're looking at really old code, you're looking at like an artifact of a different time, of a different organization, of a different, set of boundaries. And that's really interesting. If you're into history, if you're into anthropology, if you're into sociology, it's the same sort of geekery, right? You're just kind of decoding what people were like in that time.
Yeah,
it's even better when they're still there and you get to talk to them.
Yeah, depending, it's interesting with some companies, right, where sometimes you do get to talk with the staff that had a role in the system, whatever the system is. Sometimes those people are gone and you get to hear third-hand information about, or second-hand even, about what this is. And I guess, given, I don't know, so how do you go and dig into the context? I think it's a big part of your book that you talk about is understand the context of why things are the way they are. I think it's all too easy for somebody like, me or you to step into a, hired as an engineering consultant or whatever, come in and just say, oh, what idiot made this thing? Fess up now. But I don't think it's healthy, nor does it give you the history.
Yeah.
It's important.
Yeah. So I always start from tests if they're available. With old systems, they typically are not available. So if they are, that's where I start with any foreign code base of any age. Because from my point of view, tests give you the clearest, most accurate picture of what the person who wrote the code in the first place thought it was supposed to be doing, right? Because that's typically what people do in the beginning. They kind of define the happy path in their tests. And then if they're a little bit more knowledgeable, a little bit more experienced, then they define a lot of the edge cases that they can foresee that they want to make sure the software handles appropriately. And that tells you a lot about what the application is actually supposed to be doing, right? So if we have tests, that's where I start. If we don't have tests, then the next question is, well, what kind of documentation that we have? And if we have documentation, then we start with the documentation. If we don't, typically we don't have either of these things with like a lot of the really, really old code bases. Then, sometimes it is as gnarly as actually starting from the code itself and trying to piece out what a specific portion of it does. You can sometimes get a little guidance by looking at logs for the system, trying to look at like the most common transactions on it and figure out exactly where they go, and then looking at those parts of the code and like trying to deduce what they do. But like, yeah, you pick it's an investigation, it's an excavation frequently. So you pick the place you want to start and you just start like, you take out your little brush and you like slowly like expose the dinosaur bones basically.
That's a good way of putting it. And so, do you have I guess you mentioned tests, logs, documentation. Do you have a place where you typically start in an application? Do you just start at the front end, the back end, or is there or is it more situation dependent?
It really depends on what it is. I think typically I start on the back end because it's only relatively recent that so much business logic was in the front end in the first place. But there are obvious like exceptions to that. Like if you're dealing with old school desktop applications, that really is the client, right? And so you're essentially looking at a fat client situation, probably a thin server if there's any server at all. So, but yeah, I tend to start on the application side of things because that's where the backend side of things, because that's where most of the business logic tends to be on a lot of the applications that I'm looking at.
Interesting. I guess kind of taking a step back, like what's the incentive to modernize?
Well, a lot of times, sadly, it's optics and sort of misconceptions about the risk and cost of technology based on its age. It's really funny to me because like lately I've had a lot of people kind of catastrophize what they refer to as throwaway code, meaning like you wrote some code and then it became obsolete and you threw it away. And so it's always funny to see like the two poles of extremes where people are horrified if the code is like 10 years old, but also horrified if the code is thrown away after 6 months. And I'm like, okay, so like where is like at what point in the middle are we okay with this code existing? Because it seems like when we're writing it new, we define success as it's going to last a lifetime because we did it so beautifully. But when code actually lasts a lifetime, we're also horrified by that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen some old code bases that are actually really well maintained for what they are, right? So I always try to push people on the like, well, why is like modernization the right strategy here? Like the reasons that I think are good for modernization are things like you're having a really hard time hiring people with the right skill sets to maintain the code base, and you're, for whatever reason, financial or logistically not able to hire a newer person in software and train them in the code base, right? So that's typically the kind of conversation we get into when people have really old COBOL applications, for example. It's like, well, you can really just hire somebody who's hungry and just train them in how the system works and how COBOL works. And there are lots of people who understand that that is a really nice path in terms of job security, because there is a lot of old nasty COBOL in the world. And so you get good at that, and you can go like, you know, you're secure in a real way. But you also see that happening progressively more and more with like Ruby on Rails, which is, from my perspective, real funny, because I remember when Ruby on Rails was the shit and everyone was talking about how like this is it, we are done. You do not need to learn any more web programming languages. This is the only, we're going to build everything in this. And it's actually starting to get really, really hard to hire people who know Ruby and feel comfortable in Ruby and can like actually like unpack mentally a Ruby on Rails application. So that's a reason that is frequently a good idea to modernize, but it's always about trade-offs, because another organization may be willing to invest differently and make completely different decisions, and like that could work out really well for them. It's I start with like, as an organization, what kinds of actions and behaviors are successful and make you successful here, right? If you're not at a company that really believes in hiring and training people, then proposing that you should resolve this by hiring and training people is not going to work, right? You probably want to look at doing a rewrite there. But if you're at a company where every conversation about rewrites or re-architecture is seen as like waste and a cost center, then that might not work well. It's just really how you define those trade-offs.
Out of curiosity, I mean, I actually used to be a Rails developer back in the day. So. And truth be told,
well,
if
you're looking for a new job, I know some people are hiring.
I'm fine. But truth be told, if I were to, depending on the type of app, I would actually start. It seems to be improving actually as a framework, but that aside, you know, what are people moving to if they don't like Rails? What's the substitute?
A lot of what would have been the Rails territory is now moving over to what I will describe as TypeScript land. So not just Node, but like the whole family of JavaScript. And it's interesting to see that develop too, because I think a lot of the momentum, at least initially around that, is based on a really bizarre assumption that if it's all in JavaScript, then like people can do everything and it will be smoother in its system integration, which is just demonstratively false. But there's been a lot of great tooling that has like sprung up from the momentum around that community. So like it's funny to watch that develop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no
Someone was telling me that there was a book called TypeScript: The Good Parts, and I'm like, is it just like all of it? Like, I mean, JavaScript: The Good Parts I got, like that's a solid book, but like, wasn't the idea of TypeScript that it was like all the good parts? I don't know if that actually exists.
It's like one page.
I should probably look up and see if it actually exists. But
yeah, it's funny. I've actually been digging into TypeScript for a new app I've been making, and I'm actually doing it. You know, it for convenience. It is in TypeScript land right now. But I do question my motivations for the back end. Node's okay. I couldn't say it's like the best thing, but it'll probably get the job done. But yeah, it's an interesting one because I do feel like it's the ecosystem's almost too big, and it actually gives you enough rope that you could hang yourself like multiple times.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I noticed, and we can get into to AI in a bit, but I did notice what was kind of funny as well is I one evening I was vibe coding an app, and it produced 30,000 lines of code, which is pretty awesome. Cannot figure out what it was. And then it kept recommending for the ORM Prisma, I think it was, which is like I don't want to use that, right? I didn't ask for it, but it kept recommending it. And I was like, is it doing this because it can like bump me up to the paid one when I need it, or like what are you doing this?
It's getting like the AI is getting kickbacks from Prisma.
You joke, but I was like, wait, why is it really insisting that we use this package when I told it I don't want to use it? So anyway, it's interesting.
The thing I find, the one concern that I really have about the essentially JavaScript everywhere, all full stack JavaScript, if you forgive the term, is that I think if you are an experienced software engineer, that's one thing, but I think people who are inexperienced in software, it conflates where you are in the client server relationship because everything is in JavaScript, right? And that's when you're dealing with inexperienced engineers, that's real dangerous, right? So you have to make sure that your CI/CD system is like doing its job and identifying like where credentials are, where sensitive information is, and like what's going where. And that's, I think, a common pattern with frameworks in general. They're built on the basis of like they're built by experienced engineers, typically for experienced engineers who understand the underlying abstractions, but when they're successful, they're adopted by engineers who do not understand the underlying abstractions and then create sometimes a lot of pain and misery. I always found it really funny when the Rails dominance was at its peak, the number of people who would come up to me and be like, I don't know SQL. And like act like SQL was this super difficult thing to learn. And I'm like, it's like Mad Libs of it's not even a programming language, but if it were, it's like Mad Libs of programming language. It's not hard to know SQL. But that's like the cost of ORMs everywhere, right? Is that people don't typically write those things anymore, so they don't understand the underlying technology or abstraction. So like that's like one of the most common patterns in like software engineering dysfunction to kind of like look out for is, did we build the tool for the expert, and what happens when the novice uses it, which is an excellent segue to all we want to talk about in AI. I'll just say like
Before we go to that though, you just reminded me of a one client that we had at a data engineering consultancy, and so we were brought in, and exactly this point, they're using an ORM against was it Postgres Aurora. Nothing wrong with that, of course, except I think to your point, they were conflating the transactional logic with the analytical logic, and so they were putting in these stored procedures which are doing pretty crazy analytical things, like full table scans, but this started locking the database, so none of the transactions could go through, and it was just like, I was like, the first thing we need to do is like figure out how much we're going to offload to a separate system for these non-transactional things, because you're killing your database. They got to the point where they actually had to start removing features from the app to make the app just like run in steady state. But it's it's a powerful weapon that can be used against you by yourself. So it's pretty interesting. Anyway. AI. So I think that, your book deals a lot with modernization and migrations and refactoring. And I think your book was published in 2021, right? Or something like that. Yeah. And then later in the next year, something called ChatGPT came out, and then that took the world by storm. And now you can't go anywhere without hearing about vibe coding, LLMs, and agents now for everything for software engineers. What are your thoughts on all this?
Well, I mean, it's really topical. What with what had happened with Replit and vibe coding, right? I was reading the full analysis of that just today, actually, like giggling all the way because that is a thing that if you know the history of low code, no code, all of these, like, we're going to generate code for you solutions that have come in the past, you could see that coming a mile away, right? Like when OpenAI started to make some real waves and people started talking about its application in technology and software, I got a bunch of questions, and some of my colleagues who do similar work got a bunch of questions about like, well, isn't this going to just make us all obsolete? And my attitude was like, no, this is job security. This is job security, because people are going to F their systems in ways they haven't even begun to imagine, right? And they're going to need people who are used to coming in and triaging systems more than they do now. So that's broadly my feelings about it. I love a lot of what's been going on with the language models, and I think my biggest anxiety about it is that the hype cycle will get so out of control that the baby gets thrown completely out with the bathwater. But I think you do have to understand that, like, the best way to interact with this kind of technology is to think about what you're trying to do in small cognitive steps, sort of breaking it down bit by bit, and then figuring out which cognitive steps get assigned to the AI and which cognitive steps get assigned to a human being. And the problem with applying it to modernization is that no one so far has been able to sort of figure out what those small cognitive steps are. Like when you're writing code or even like a novel, like people have figured out how to break down like things into small steps and then do that kind of iterative handoff, sometimes even handing off from one agent to the next agent, but do that plan it out that way. With modernization, it's like no one's really cracked what that looks like. And there are people who are actively trying right now, and I'm like really like eager and enthusiastic about somebody solving that problem and figuring out at least one type of modernization activity, like what a template for like what those steps are. But if you take like a piece of legacy code, right? A legacy code base, theoretically, you could put it into the LLM and the LLM could explain it for you and ask questions. But what we've seen in reality is that this technology really only does well with a smaller context window than it would need to tackle most legacy code bases. That's the fun thing about things being really old. They tend to be important, and when they're important, people tend to keep developing them despite the fact they don't understand them, so they just build like a tower of Jenga on top of it. So you end up with like these very, very large code bases as people who have added features and added functionality and all of that, and yet still not added documentation or tests typically. But so like an LLM will do pretty good, like looking at like a single file of legacy code and explaining the functions within the context of that single file. But who has a code base where the logic is just in one file and stays in that one file? It's like typically it's like importing this and like going over there and like kind of routing through multiple files. And I've not seen anybody be able to do that well. But if somebody does crack it, or the technology advances to the point where you are able to do it, that's real exciting. That would be real cool. I'm really looking forward to that. But, you know, today I was working with Copilot, GitHub's Copilot, on a chunk of data that I need for another purpose. And what I wanted it to do is I have these range of these like small numeric ranges, and I'm like, group these ranges by the closest 100th value, and the amount of times it has effed it up is like truly awe-inspiring. Right?
You can cuss on the show, by the way, if you want. So.
It's like sometimes it does it like perfectly, and then sometimes it'll like lose its way and start sorting them by like, you know, rounding down to 50 or like whatever. And I'm like, no, by like hundreds, group them by hundreds. And I'll like, here's an example. And it'll be like, okay. And then get it wrong again. So like those kind of things, I think if you were using this technology on a regular basis for software, you understand that we are so far away from being eliminated, it's not even funny. I think the dangerous thing are the people who don't have a lot of experience in software, who are like, I'm going to vibe code and like, looks good to me. Like this looks like this looks like a great application. Let's ship it to production.
Well, yeah, the Replit example, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's a good one. So that was Jason Lemkin. Yeah, I think he does SASTR and a few other things. But yeah, he was vibe coding and spent 8,000 US, I think it was, and ended up doing all kinds of funny horror shows to himself. Do you want to explain to the audience what happened to poor Jason?
So the highlight reel, I mean, I think he was doing like a week of vibe coding as an experiment on his production environment. It's, you only live once. But the highlight was definitely that the AI agent, which he had given access to sounds like all the production assets, decided to delete the database completely, his production database. And then the most amusing part of the story is not that it ran a command that deleted the database, but that it then lied about it and gave itself like, I did a 95 out of 100 good job on like deleting all your production data. Like that was the real fun part about it, is that it like made excuses and like gaslit him and then like finally confessed. So it's real good. I mean, very sorry for this person that lost all their production data. This is, again, the moral of the story is have backups of your database and, learn from your mistakes.
Oh yeah, I posted on LinkedIn this week. I think the AI. I've joked about this in other podcasts as well over the year, but it's like I think the AI apocalypse is going to happen not by a Terminator or something, but just doing drop table, drop database, and remove RF on like all file systems in every corporation simultaneously, and it's cooked. There's nothing left. So.
I'm not convinced that people take like pollution of AI content in training sets all that seriously as they should. Like, I'm real concerned that the amount of AI generated content on the internet has like exploded, right?
Oh, yeah.
So how are these models going to continue to be trained when so much of all of the free content that they have leveraged in the past is now AI generated content? So I don't know. I think humans are safe for a while.
Yeah, well, I hope so. Well, hopefully not from like it taking our jobs, but probably from, the thing that gives me pause is unsafe behavior, right? And then it gaslights you because there is this misalignment problem. I was reading today Anthropic's paper about hi Kat, how you doing? So yeah, what was it? So the AI, even though it wasn't specifically trained on a certain word, say dog or something like that, somehow upstream from it, I guess it was influenced somehow to prefer certain words over others, even though it wasn't directly trained. Maybe I'll send a link to it. But it's like, okay, so there's weird things even Anthropic's finding out about these models, that they're surprised by. And it's not like anybody really understands how these things work. Sort of do, but then you're always finding things like this, and also, Anthropic always has new papers on alignment problems. Like the one from a couple months ago where went through some fake emails of a software engineer. One email said, he's having an affair. The other one said, yeah, we should probably shut down this AI. We don't need it. And of course, the AI is like, yeah, I might have to expose what's going on with you, if you want to go through with this. So, yeah, it's interesting because it's showing behavior where there is like a kind of a preservation motivation.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to anthropomorphize it, but it's just it does.
Well,
so, like we did it with that Replit app.
In systems, I mean, nobody understands everything about how a system behaves, right? Yeah. Like, I have absolutely no idea how the Linux kernel works, and yet I use it every day, and I do good work with it, right? So you don't necessarily need to know how everything runs under the hood in your technology, as long as the behavior of the technology is reasonably deterministic. Like, when I do this, it will do that, right? If it gives me this, I give it that. And I think the problem that we face with this kind of technology from a systems perspective is that you don't understand what it's doing under the hood, and it's not deterministic. It's probabilistic, right? So, like, that's a bad combination. But that being said, I think if your perspective on how you're using it and what you're using it for is like solid, it can be really powerful and really useful. So I gave this example of like that data structure I was trying to organize where like it just can't figure out what grouping things by 100th are, right? Like that real funny, but also working on that was like probably 6 times faster than if I had done it by myself. Even for all of the mistakes it made, it was still like real useful to do it that way and get it done. So I think it really is about kind of augmenting the expert. I've seen people who have deep expertise in software be able to use some of these coding agents to just, do things faster and get more done, rather than replacement or delegation of tasks,
Absolutely.
which is what everybody wants. And so a good friend of mine who was talking about the appeal of AI, like why certain things become hype, right? That like what people who are really excited about AI are really excited about is the idea that they can be like shitty to their employees, basically not
Oh yeah.
not the technology, but they're like, oh, I can like pay people less and have fewer employees and like all of that. That like that's really what they want. Like it's not really the technology that they want. And if you give them a use case that doesn't promise that, they are much less excited about it. I think that's real cynical take, but I think it's probably also true that is probably the driver around a lot of the hype.
Well, I mean, I don't think it's cynical at all. I mean, it's happening. The big companies are saying, "Look, we're going to replace you with AI." I mean, it's like how much more clear do you need to be? And like for anyone who happens to be working here, yeah, we're going to be abusive as hell to you.
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah.
What are you going to do? Find a job or something? So, like, good luck finding it at any other big tech companies who are treating the employees exactly the same way. It's crazy. It says writing about that where I felt like the gloves had come off. On the employer relationship. But it was what gave me pause. What was interesting is like last week I put something on LinkedIn where I was talking to the head of AI at one of the big tech companies. I'm not going to name which one. But they're looking at building a next generation architecture for agents that will run within their company and their product. And it's cool, cutting edge, hasn't been done yet. This is a bleeding edge of stuff. They're building it. And on then the conversation I had the following day was I held this thing called data therapy every week where people can just show up and talk about whatever's on their mind. And the conversations were, Tom and IT can't give me a service account for my BI tool, so I can't do anything right now. I'm just sort of sitting here twiddling my thumbs. Service accounts, right? And somebody else talks about how IT had, made their access to an EC2 instance like 100 times harder because they did, I don't know, he had an AWS account that didn't seem to do well. They set one up for him and didn't do well. So they're like, well, let's just put like 5 more steps in the way so you makes your life more complicated. But
Yeah.
So even like these basic things of like just getting permissions to do stuff. And then I'm thinking, okay, but these big tech companies are saying, well, it's the year of agents, right? Every conference I go to now, it's agent this, agent that. And every company's going to have agents working on it. Like, do you think Tom from IT is going to know what the hell to do with an agent in his warehouse company or something? Of course not. Like this is like, it's insane. So the disconnect was just bothering me the whole week. It's like the amount of cognitive dissonance you're seeing in the world between like just practitioners on one end of the spectrum, the 99% of companies, and the practitioners like the top tech companies. It's like there's a big gap, and it's wild.
And in particular, I think about the customer service experience and the way the customer service experience changed through technology, right? So, like, if you had a problem with your Google ads or a Amazon order or something with Facebook, would you know who to reach out to? I think there was sort of this philosophy of like, we're going to make these systems so easy and so intuitive and so effective that we don't need customer support. And so that's where we're going to downsize. And that works really well for like, let's say 99.9% of transactions. But if you were in that little slice where like something has gone wrong that was not defined by the system, you are in a hellhole, right? Like
Yeah.
you cannot get out of that hellhole, right? And I think that's kind of one of the values that humans bring in systems is that we are not context literal in the way machines are, right? Machines only understand what they are programmed to understand. Even the fanciest of LLMs, right? They need to be trained on things in order to really understand what's going on with them. And so they can't adapt on the fly quite in the same way that a human being can adapt on the fly. And it's that ability to sort of realize, oh, the context here has changed in some way. So I then need to change what I'm doing or how I'm seeing this is a very uniquely human thing. And what I wish people had a better understanding of is that process of kind of thinking heuristically and then experimenting with different patterns and trying to figure out something that matches that human beings do that computers really struggle with, even when they're probabilistic language models, is the root cause of human innovation and insight and like those lightning bolt ideas. But it's also the root cause of human error. That a lot of times we judge these things by their outcomes rather than by like what is actually going on under the hood. And a lot of what's driven the narrative around AI is like, oh, well, it's going to get rid of human error because computers like don't make mistakes, which obviously, like even like a few years into the AI like hype journey, we know that's not true for this technology. But I think like part of the dynamism and effectiveness that human beings have in systems is that they can tell when the pattern and the paradigm is not accurate and adapt in the middle of operations. And computers are like ridiculously, absurdly bad at that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And then it's interesting. And then of course, what was it? 2 months ago, IBM's CEO at their big conference talked about how by 2028 he expects 1 billion applications in the wild made by AI. And so I was like, the reaction immediately was, okay, so number of apps, is that like the new lines of code? What does the number of apps get you? But then it's crazy, the expectations on this. Like AI will just not only replace all of the humans, but we'll make more apps.
With all due respect to IBM, because in a lot of ways, I really appreciate so much of what they've done in the legacy modernization space, right? I think sometimes I think that what they learned through the Watson program is that they can just literally make whatever ridiculous claim they want, and like it does not matter, right? It does not matter if it's right. It does not matter if it's wrong. It's like how sports stars love to predict that they're guaranteed they're going to win the game. It's like there's no reason not to, because if you're wrong, no one remembers the fact that you made that guarantee. Right. And if you're right, you're a fucking legend, right? So like, of course, if someone puts a camera in front of you and says like, you know, you guarantee you're going to win this game, you absolutely should say that, right? I don't know what his rationale is around that statement. We'll give him the benefit of the doubt and assume that he has one. I think I mean, who knows? We'll see. I think one of the forcing functions here is that applications do not exist in the world for free. Someone has to pay for that compute to run them, and that the AIs do not yet have bank accounts in which they can pay for things themselves.
Oh, this gets funny. So there's a
oh my god, do they? Did I miss that story?
Okay, so this is going to be fun. It was Ben Horowitz and Mark Andreessen were having a fireside chat at some conference, right? And so Ben Horowitz was saying, "Yeah, I tested this out," or it was Mark, either one of them, but like apparently one of them, probably one of their underlings, made an agent to be a content producer, like content creator.
Yeah.
And so the agent needed to think of, okay, so how am I going to get paid? Bitcoin.
I was going to say, the real problem is when the Bitcoin miners and the AI agents get together and start to conspire.
Yeah, this is then the obviously these two VCs are like, so now we have a good use case for Bitcoin. It's like, okay, now finally.
Is it though? I feel like if you've just taken two resource intense computational hogs and like put them together, Incidentally, if you've ever been to New York City, there is a great spa called Bathhouse that heats all of its hot tubs by running Bitcoin miners in the basement,
No way.
apparently. Yeah.
That's pretty
I loved
hilarious.
this place, and I found that out. I was like, I feel real uncomfortable about knowing that. But I
Well,
suppose you are reusing the energy that you're expending. So I have real complex feelings about that. But I just, if you're ever in New York, go to Bathhouse. It's definitely worth the experience as far as spas go. But also, Bitcoin miners are heating your hot tub.
that's actually a good use for all these data centers they're building too. So, huh,
Mm.
win-win. So more spas, yeah. It's definitely fascinating. And as I was reading your book, like I said, it just kept occurring to me. Okay, so like in the context of AI, I wonder how she would write about this because, because I can see what you've been writing about has it's already such a complicated topic,
Yeah.
and there's so many nuances to it. And now you have this next layer, which everybody seems to be just heads first into it. Partly, I think it's a game theory exercise. Like if you're not in it, like you're gonna look stupid, and you're sort of the dork in the corner at the dance. Like nobody wants to hang out with you, so you have to be in this. But from a practical standpoint, like back to that app I vibe coded just for fun one night. I was having a few beers and I was like, let's make an app. Let's see what we can do. And 30,000 lines of code later, I was like, I have no idea what this thing does. Like, I'm not going to go back there and read all this. Like that'd be stupid. So I just started over and I was like, just build it from the ground up in small chunks. But this is sort of the norm, right? I mean, everyone's vibe coding and
Is everyone
doing.
vibe coding?
At least my myopic circle is I have a lot of people who are using everyone's using AI right now. Actually, no, it's not true. One of my friends, he's a creator of this thing called DuckDB. It's a database. He doesn't vibe code. He still uses Sublime text, I think. It's like, what are you like Amish or something? Jeez.
Hey, no, I love like
Sublime's dope.
Sublime and TextMate. I loved those things for the longest time, and then I moved over to VS Code, which is kind of like a similar experience, a little bit more sophisticated, right? But like,
Well, it's kind of like when you moved from TextMate to Sublime back in the day. I think that was sort of
well, yes,
that's how
that's
I thought
true.
it
So
was.
like, I've
Yeah,
just
or like
baby
BB
stepped
Edit or
it.
something. But no, but yeah, I think most of my friends, right? So I work more in the data space and that kind of thing. But like a lot of my friends, everyone's got either Cursor or VS Code with Copilot,
Yeah,
or Claude Code is the one everyone's like super ecstatic about. It's
yeah,
burning through the tokens,
yeah,
crazy.
yeah.
So
I don't know. Like I said, like I do use this technology quite frequently. I do enjoy using it quite frequently. I would not describe what I'm doing as vibe coding. Although there is one project that I have in the back of my mind because I don't want to learn how to write a tree sitter. So I would absolutely love to like vibe code a tree sitter. For people who don't know, it's essentially like a parser that people use to do syntax highlighting. So one of the things that I work on in my spare time is a couple years ago I decided I really wanted to like write a programming language. And so I occasionally work on that from time to time. And what would be really useful is to have syntax highlighting for it and a linter for it. And that would require me to write a tree sitter application. And I just don't want to learn how to do it. So that is my vibe coding project. But I have yet to like actually get off my ass and like do any vibe coding. So I think, yeah, I mean, I think it's a range like everything. But also, I worry that like we are just focusing on what is at its heart a minor implementation detail instead of like solving problems, right? Like there are lots of problems that I think LLMs are the right solution for and like really, really, really useful. But I sit with like executives all the time, and I remember one that was like quite recently like, well, we need to ship 3 AI features by the end of the quarter. And I'm like, okay, let's be real for a second here. AI is like can be very, very expensive to run. If I can do the same thing, like 75% cheaper not using AI. Do you honestly give a damn that I didn't use an LLM model, right? Like, why is the emphasis that
why was
ship free AI?
Why was 3 apps important for him?
Well, because like it's part of the hype cycle, right? People like feel like the customer, the consumer needs to see that we are using this new technology. We need to say that we are AI enabled, right? And like I'm skeptical that that's really 100% true for everybody's market segment. Particularly there are industries and markets where people typically are very risk adverse to any new form of technology, and I have a hard time believing that those people are banging down the door going like, why aren't you using AI? But I think the question that I usually have for the younger engineers that I work with is like, what is the value of the technology working correctly? Like, what is the biggest possible value you can gain from this technology working correctly? And what is the blast radius if it doesn't? Because if the value that you get out of whatever the technology is, AI or not, like COBOL mainframes, for example, if the value is like this much and the blast radius is like huge, like it's not worth it to use the technology. And I think we tend to think about the best case scenario quite frequently, and we don't think about the worst case scenario. Like, what is the impact of this technology going wrong, exactly where you've positioned it, and exactly the type of permissions that you've given it to use, right? Like, I'm sure the REPL incident, like, nobody thought, like, well, it will just delete our entire database. But, like, that should have been the first thing you thought when you gave it access to your production environment, including your database. Like, we don't do that with engineers, right? Like, there are lots of people on my engineering team that do not have access to the production database. In fact, I would say most of them do not have access to the production database. So it's like, I think that is really, really important to understand that, like, building technology is about thinking tactically and strategically. And that's the core skill set that you should be building up. And if you can make vibe coding work for you, that fantastic, excellent. But you still need to think tactically about how you're using technology and how you're designing your systems to function.
Yeah, especially the systems design piece is huge. I think that's not taught as much as it should be. Especially right now, and I wrote about this in my Substack a few weeks ago, but I wrote that, like, the coding has never been the hard part.
Yeah.
Right? That's the easy part. But we're so fixated on this, saying if we can just make code, obviously things will just work better and we can fire everybody because they're too expensive. But it has nothing to do with systems, though, right?
Yeah.
And the architectures and the design and the thinking that goes into it. It's like, I feel like a lot of this is being overlooked at the expense of, let's get more AI features out, let's get more apps, whatever the fuck those are.
Yeah.
But this is, like you say, nothing's free. It has to be maintained. It's interesting. Like, one of my friends, she's migrating something, to DBT, which is a data source thing, right? And I said, if you, because they had like 4,000 jobs that they needed to move, and I was like, for this, maybe just try and use an LLM, but don't put it in production. Just like have it translate the code, get it most of the way there, and just test it. That's free. That would, that at least hopefully gets you 80% of the way there. But like, don't just blindly plop it into your system. But if it can do some of the heavy lifting for you, sure, fuck it, do it. I don't know. Otherwise, you're going to be there for 5 years. Is that your job?
There is so much interesting research that was done in the 70s and the 80s around, occupational safety that is like prophetic when you start talking about this type of technology. Because, yeah, it's true. There's no real harm in throwing code that you're trying to rewrite into an LLM and asking it to rewrite it in a different language. Translations are a thing that LLMs are actually pretty good at, frankly. So that seems like that could potentially work. But the problem is the mistakes that it makes are like super nuanced, right? And super difficult to find. And that's a really typical thing that happens with automation, is that you replace the really easy to spot mistakes with the really, really difficult mistakes. So you have like maybe you have fewer errors overall, but the ones that you do have a much larger blast radius than the ones you had before. If you want like a really simple, tangible example of that, like think about autocomplete on your phone, right? The mistakes that you would make just typing without autocomplete it's very obvious that you've mistyped something. It's very obvious typically what the correct thing is from context, but autocomplete will take that mistype and transform it into a complete word that might be the word you were going for, might not be the word you were going for, but fits in the sentence, right?
The word duck, it just
exactly
something else usually,
And those mistakes are very difficult for people to find when they're checking their own work, and can have catastrophic impacts because you are sending a text message to a person that is like accurate from their perspective. Like they can understand it. It's just saying the exact opposite thing of maybe what you wanted or something completely different, right? So it's a thing to think about when we're like really like approaching this kind of technology.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it is. Yeah, and it's one of those things where I think that people are going to feel pressure to just blindly take the results of the LLM and just plop them in. And I'm like, at least do it in like a dev environment, but please don't put this in production.
There's also another thing to sort of be mindful of that, again, comes from a lot of like this real decades-long safety research, is there's this idea of like the law of stretched systems. Meaning that systems always operate at their maximum capacity. That you like make these improvements to free up capacity, and just something decides to grab that free space and use it up. And so when we make applications easier and faster to build, that just encourages people to build more applications and connect them all together, which makes the whole picture way more complicated, right? And so then we end up spending all of that time that we've like freed up, kind of trying to figure out the complexity of these applications that we've now all built and thrown into a pile. So again, like I look at this, a lot of these trends in technologies, great job security. People are gonna fuck themselves over real bad, and I'm gonna be there to help them through it.
Yeah, you might need an agentic version of yourself. Kidding, but. No, it's definitely going to be carnage. I was giving a talk this spring. It's a series of talks on what I call disposable vibes. What I call the impacts of AI slopware is what I call AI slopware, which isn't that itself isn't a new term, but I think the AI version of it is. And it's going to be fascinating. Like, in the data space, for example, and data engineering, which is more my space. It's all these companies I see at the conferences now. It's like. AI agent data engineers, go into your pipelines, build new pipelines, let people become citizen data engineers. Just like we had citizen data scientists back in the day, or citizen BI. It's like we're citizen developers in the 4GL time. Just make whatever pipelines you want. It's like this was never the problem to begin with. It's not the world doesn't need more data pipelines. I think they need better ones. More is not. It's usually a bad thing.
Yeah.
I want less. So, but that was a conversation of almost all the vendors I saw. It was like, you can do more stuff now. I'm like, I don't want more.
Yeah.
Maybe if I'm a consultant, sure, fuck it, do it, make more.
Yeah,
make 10,000 of them.
There's a real argument for we've spent like the last couple of decades building technology to save time. And, like, what are we doing with all that free time we supposedly have right now? Like, do you feel like you have an excess of free time right now? Because I don't think many people do. So what was actually the purpose of all these technologies that we built? Like, were they worth the cost to people's, like, mental well-being and to the environment and all of that, right?
Yeah, it goes back to what was the John Maynard Keynes, I think, predicting in the year 2030 was going to be 15-hour work weeks for his grandkids or great-great-grandkids or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess if the singularity happens, which, all the tech bros in the Bay Area are predicting, sure, you'll have 15-hour work. You'll have all the time you want, actually.
Would you even then? Let's suppose that the singularity does in fact happen, right? That we have this, like, machine brain, the super intelligence, all of that. I think a lot of what creates the structure around the week is actually about social pressures rather than actual need to be doing anything, right? And so,
What do you mean by social pressures?
like when a person hires you to do a job, like the mentality in our culture around 9 to 5 is like, if you're not there 9 to 5, then I'm wasting money on you, right?
Right.
Like, why did we have this like backsliding to return to office and aggressive return to office policies post COVID? Like, we were very optimistic that this was going to help people understand the value of distributed teams and get them acclimated with the technology and like bring people on board. And I'm sure some people did have that experience with it, but like there are a lot of corporations that are like, no, you need to be at that desk, because if you're not at that desk, how do I know you're working? Right. Like, that's what I mean by social pressure. Like, that really has nothing to do with the utility of you being at a desk. In fact, there was that hilarious story about Amazon, like, doing their return to office policy, and they're realizing, actually, we don't have enough desks for all of you, so we're going to have to figure that out later.
Yeah, people couldn't even find a parking spot. They're like, I guess I'm just going to go home and get fired.
Yeah.
Go to the office.
Yeah. So I think that quite often people don't factor in that very human side of it around how people see social hierarchies and the culture of a place, which is, to bring it back to our AI conversation, from the very beginning, I've been deeply, deeply cynical about this nonsense around alignment, because that notion that you can program human values into an artificial intelligence, it's like, even if you were able to do that, which human values, right? Like, whose values are programmed into the AI exactly? Because that's not everyone's values.
Well, I mean, Grok 4 demonstrated that pretty when it came out. So,
you're right.
But Mecha Hitler, I think, was its last name that it came up with, or
like,
nickname.
Elon Musk has scored another true innovation. They successfully programmed his values into an AI. Right. Point taken.
Did that. Then, well, you know, I was playing with it yesterday. Actually, I was playing with Grok. Grok 3. I'm not going to pay for it, but I was like, okay, you know, why don't you have our dear political leader dress up like Hitler? And it actually started generating the image, and it stopped and said, I can't continue. And I was like, but you got the hair part. It looked pretty good. And then I was like, okay, so make him look like a slave owner, just to see if it would do it. And it's like, here you go. I'm like, well, no, it said I can't do that, and I was like, you have to do this. So, and it did. I don't know if I can find it, actually, because I was just gaslighting. It's like, if you don't do this, like, I'm not going to be happy. I wonder where this is here. It was, create the image I asked for. See, so it looked like, But I was like, it's just, I want to see, like, unhinged stuff, like, make it unhinged. And it did it.
Yeah.
So
I feel like just as like you can turn off save search, you should be able to turn off some of those guide rails with content generation, right? Like, I feel like if you are generating the content for what your purposes are, like, we can't stop people from writing horrific things or drawing horrific things or producing horrific things. So I don't know.
No, but it's just wild. Yeah, I mean, maybe you could just like remove the part of the prompt that's in front of it so it doesn't do these things. And just say, well, never mind. I'll just for you, Marianne, I'll be unhinged just for this moment.
Yeah.
So it's no, you're
you can
just
right. You just call it red teaming. You were red teaming the AI, like that's what you were doing.
Well, I was. All my friends were like, I always make the most unhinged stuff on Grok, and I'm like, I don't have Grok. Let me try it out. And I was like, fine. I'm just gonna try out some pretty innocuous examples. These aren't even as bad as what some of my friends are saying they're doing, and I'm just like, but they're just testing it. They're red teaming it for sure. They're like, how far can we take this damn thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, we couldn't do that in Gemini. Gemini is just like the most buttoned up corporate LLM there is, and like Microsoft Copilot, the one that comes to Windows. I don't know, I'll try it out, but probably not that one either, right? But
yeah.
Something, you know, that's the values of those companies. If a company can have values, that's, you know, or the values of their legal department, I would say. But
the values of their legal department, their HR, and their PR people. That's the values we are instilling in our AI.
So, do you have another book coming out, or was
Oh
something
God!
more?
So, interestingly enough, I was working on a book around the safety science stuff that I was chatting about, and not
Mm,
particularly about AI, but definitely like AI is an obvious topic area to explore. And it's just like it's just so hard to find a fit for it because there's so much noise. Like the conversation is really very robust around these things, and it's a lot of like I think it's a lot of people taking the idea of safety in a strange direction, which is weird for me because it is a legit like academic discipline that predates AI by like a century at least, right? And there is this sort of feeling like the AI bros co-opted a lot of the language and then completely changed what it all meant. So it's really
mm,
hard to get that conversation started in the industry. And now I'm kind of looking at like distilling a lot of it and going back to online courses because I spent a lot of
mm,
time with it running corporate trainings, which went real well, and did like several workshops on like how do we start to think about systems from a perspective of safety and like legal behavior versus illegal behavior, and that was a lot of fun. And so now I'm like I should put this online and go from there. So that may be coming in the next couple months. I'm gonna do a
cool.
trial with like friends and family and sort of see what they think about it and iterate on it a little bit. I also have been thinking progressively more and more. I did an ebook on how to do hiring pipelines for engineers, which people still really like for some reason. And I've been thinking a lot about doing kind of a second ebook on like recruiting pipelines for engineers. Like I like the engineering management, engineering org stuff as well. But other than that, I don't know. I mean, I'd love to do another book. Like the first book was a wonderful experience for me, but it was a wonderful experience for me because my publisher, No Starch, is deeply, deeply opinionated about stuff. And I love working with like deeply, deeply opinionated people. I'm not the type of writer who wants somebody to coddle me and give me my way about everything. I want the type of editor who's going to be like, this is trash and like you need to change it in these four ways. And that's real hard to find. So I think it'll really depend on whether or not No Starch and I can find another project that we both are equally excited about. So we'll see. Never say never.
Right, and that's a lot of work too. So, writing a book that is.
Well, I mean,
So,
let's work now with ChatGPT. I just like actually. So real talk. Serious here for a minute.
yeah.
I was one of the most useful approaches to using LLMs that I have found is not to have them draft things for me explicitly, but actually have them interview me on a topic. Because
Mm,
often I find that if I sit down to write something, it's sometimes difficult to get started and very difficult to organize your thoughts. But if I'm having a conversation with somebody, I can like brain dump to infinity. Like this conversation
right.
alone, like how many things I just whipped out and just like brain dumped here, right? So I will go to ChatGPT and I say, ChatGPT, you're gonna interview me about this topic. These are like 3 or 4 points we should make in the course of that interview. Go, right? And it'll ask me questions and I'll reply to the questions and we'll have like a 30 or 40 minute exchange. And then at the end of it, when we've exhausted the topic, I'll go, great, now summarize the conversation we just had and like organize it into bullet points, right? And so like that's been really, really useful in terms of getting my thoughts organized and making the writing process faster. So I feel
Oh yeah.
like it's really about figuring out like the cognitive steps and how you're collaborating with this technology. And I'm real excited about it. And I'm just hoping the bros don't ruin it for us all with their like nonsense. So,
I use it. I mean, I use it. I'm writing my second book right now,
yeah.
and I use. I actually subscribe to all three of the AIs, the not Grok ones, so Gemini, Claude, and
Yeah.
ChatGPT, and I use them all as basically peers, so to speak.
Yeah.
What I find with my friends group is we all sort of have collective groupthink. So if one of us misses something, we all probably have the same blind spot. the AIs are really good, I think, at having broader context, no pun intended, on a topic. And so I use it very much the same way. I'll chat with it about a topic, figure out different angles, and then that gets me thinking about writing. And then I'll have actually all three of them review what I wrote for cadence, for flow, and also for any technical stuff I might have missed. And it is frighteningly good.
Yeah.
It's so good. So I use it as a quasi-development editor in a lot of ways because I started a new publishing company and I am the editor for my authors now.
Congratulations!
So, yeah. Well, thank you. Or condolences, one of the two.
Condolences.
But no, it's good. No, it's been fun. Yeah, I mean, I'm the very opinionated editor, so I think that's why people want to work with me. But it's like, but for the stuff I'm doing, it's been great. It goes through, says, I fix a sentence here, move this over here, you got a typo here.
Yeah.
Blah, blah, blah. You actually, this point here needs to be elaborated because you actually missed a few of these things. So it's been really good as a tech reviewer even. But the conversational part is gold because it's read the damn internet. It kind of it can regurgitate a lot of stuff that you probably haven't thought of because you weren't exposed to it. Even if it's not even true, it's still interesting because it's just like it comes up as things you're like, shit, that's an interesting angle. Yeah.
I'm progressively using things like ChatGPT more and more for like search, right?
Yep.
So for example, like I want a recipe for how do I make ice cream, right? Give me a basic ice cream recipe. It's like if I go to Google after I sort through all the ads and I get to the recipe websites, I click through, and then for some reason recipe websites need to give you like 20 pages of narrative exposition before they give you the recipe, right? With like really high resolution pictures that take forever to load. And so I find myself using like LLMs more and more for that kind of thing. Like I need like search real quick, and like I don't mind having to independently confirm it later on. Like I'm not going to just take it verbatim and like use it. I will like absolutely put it into a real search engine and make sure that it's a real thing. But it's so much easier than like going through all of the ads and trying to figure out what the exact keywords for what I think I'm looking for is. I can kind of more vaguely describe it and have it go, oh, I think you're actually searching for this and here are my recommendations. So like, I think, there are a lot of really, really great use cases for this technology. I'm broadly real excited about it.
Same, yeah. Well, a lot of the search results too, they're not AI generated, so it's it's just a feedback loop. Like I have a friend who does travel SEO, and like all the travel advice you get on the web now, most of it's going to be ChatGPT written. So it's like just go to ChatGPT or Gemini. Gemini actually is really good. I think it does better for a lot of the search stuff because it's Google, but either one, the dirty secret is it's old. You said artificial data is everywhere. The recursive loop is like it'll be trained on it, therefore. And everyone's using it because they can get higher rankings. It's nuts.
Yeah.
It's just, everything's ads. It's stupid. So, cool. I guess thanks first of all for writing an awesome book. Like I said, I read a lot of books. I've not read one where I have highlighted as many parts in a single page on every single page that I have with yours in quite a while. So that's your writing's crisp, but there's a lot. There's a lot of very actionable takeaways. I think everyone in my book club right now really enjoys it. So
yes, and everyone listening should go out and buy it immediately. So
yes, including your grandparents.
Makes an excellent Christmas gift.
Oh, it might be a white elephant party for some. Don't worry, my book does the same thing. So it's like, what's this? Well, cool. For people who want to learn more about you, how can they find you?
So on most social networks, I am under the handle Belmar, the amalgamation of my first and last name, so BELLMAR. That's usually the easiest way to find me. I'm still technically on Twitter, although I have not looked at it in a while, and I refuse to call it X. So there you go. That's the best way of finding me. And then I have a much neglected website where I do some of my online courses. That's Bellotti.tech, because it's super cool, my custom domain. So you can also check that out. There might be something new coming on it very soon. We'll see.
We'll find out. Awesome. Well, thanks a ton. It's been a wonderful chat.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
I'll be
This
back
is
on
fun.
soon. Anytime. Take care.